And good morning, and welcome to another edition of the Kitchings Table. I'm your host, Earl Kitchings. Joining me is my co-host, Ronline Cannady. Good morning, Ronline.
Good morning. Good morning.
We are here on WBISLP, Awesome Radio 106.9 FM, and want you to know that you can always follow us on their website and click on their availability to listen to the show. You can also catch us on YouTube, Facebook, Roku, and GPAC 23 if you want to see us on a taped edition of the show. So, Ron Lee, we're still in Black History Month, and today I think it'll be kind of interesting to talk about what our topic is today because it relates to what today is. And today is what?
Yesterday was President's Day.
Okay, yesterday was President's Day. And today we're going to talk about Black men and women who have had some direct connection to the office of president here in the United States. And it wasn't until maybe, I guess, President Bush, H.W. Bush, when they started using the acronym POTUS and VPOTUS and SCOTUS and all these other acronyms for some of these positions that are held in Washington. But POTUS, for those of you who may not know, is the acronym for President of the United States, and VPOTUS would be Vice President of the United States. And today we're going to talk about those individuals who happen to have impacted those positions. And I think you're going to be surprised with a couple of the names we're going to speak about today because they don't often make it in our history lessons. And man, in a day and time where history is making history, especially in the state of Florida, where you have a governor who is so concerned about the education of children that he's wanting to marginalize it to the point where it's almost eliminated. I had this thought the other day, Ronline. Well, you can marginalize it, Mr. Governor, but as long as a parent has access to a computer and the internet, you can't do one thing about it.
Yes, I am with you on that. However, because we are not in control of the internet, it goes back to what we've been talking about. It's best to have those books into your home. When I looked at our superintendent here, Diana Green, where they were ordered to every box up every book content they had in those classrooms, and they
And
had
the media center.
at
And the media center.
so it wasn't the classrooms.
It was both.
Okay,
They
and
had
the
to box it all up.
right so it's like, as I asked before, how did the books get there in the beginning? They had to be approved from the start. At least that's what my thoughts are. And you can correct me on that because you are a part of the school system, so firsthand what happens when a book enters the classroom. You all are not bringing the books in. Is that correct?
You are not bringing the majority of the books in.
Okay.
I think when, for instance, a book has been vetted already, it may be vetted from a few years back, and uh, you may bring that book that has been approved into your classroom. Then that is a book you do bring in. So if you say, for instance, you were at a different school and the books you used to have in your classroom are not there when you go to a different school, then you do bring in uh, books,
Okay.
but they're books that have already been vetted and approved.
Okay. So I'm correct in my thinking that it's not that teachers are bringing in their own books.
No,
But
no.
okay, all right.
Yeah, it's
So
not something that they're bringing from home uh, directly to the classroom. That I don't think is allowed.
okay, all right. So as you said, to be censored on that level, and of course, the civil rights, the constitutional rights, all of that plays a part as you know the our governor crossing those lines. So it goes back to literacy again, as we've talked about, of having your children's books at home and making sure that if you're not reading them to them, that you are having someone to read them um, to them until they're able to read for themselves and get an understanding. Would you agree
Well,
with?
I would agree with that, and that is something that most families, especially young families, need to work on. I know it's difficult to build a library at home because if you don't purchase the books, then the books are absent from home and they're not there. So it's something that needs to be worked on a, I guess, an annual basis. And if you can't get to the library to check out books, you're even more deficient. So, but it's interesting you say that because the segue to what this governor is doing leads to what we're going to be talking about this morning indirectly, and that is the position of President of the United States and Vice President of the United States. And we're gonna start with presidential candidates who were black men and women who were candidates. And we've only had one that went on to become the president. But when we talk about presidential candidates, since I put on my notes 1900, but really we can go way past that and say presidential candidates since 1970, yeah, to be more exact.
Mhm.
And there is a list that of 5 individuals who felt so compelled and so moved to want to run for the highest office in America. And because these individuals made that decision, for those of them who really, really got into the process of campaigning, it did make them a known figure, and it also brought some other heartburns that come along with running for this office because at that level, it seems there cannot be a race at local, state, federal level unless, as they say, some dirt is tossed out or thrown about an individual who is running for office. But our first presidential candidate, who was an African American, goes all the way back to 1972, 50 years ago. The Honorable Shirley Chisholm of New York placed her name in nomination and candidacy for the presidential office of the United States of America. And I must tell you that at that time, being a senior in high school, that really it made the radar, but then again, it was under the radar simply because I don't think a lot of people really took her serious, even though former Senator Shirley Chisholm was a very serious woman. But I don't think people took her candidacy serious, Ronline.
I think you're right. At that time, I was a little girl, and I do remember hearing about her, and I remember seeing her on television a few times. And as a little girl, you are always thinking that the person is, when they're saying exactly what they mean and meaning exactly what they say, it's misconstrued as being mean.
Right.
However, um, as I got older and learned about her, I realized no, she was direct to the point, and she meant what she said, you
Right.
know. And I would have loved to see her walk into her calling of the president of the United States. I would have really loved that. Um, and to know that she made her mark, but I think we missed the gym. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm sure we missed out on her knowledge, her wisdom, her vernacular for doing things the way she did it. But I also think that timing is everything. And when you look at when she decided to run for president, it was not very long. It wasn't even 10 years after the Voting Rights Act for Black people had been passed and the Civil Rights Act had been passed by President Johnson. So that was a very bold move by a Black woman at that time. But
Yeah,
that's who Shirley Chisholm was. She was bold and she was very impactful. And, when you think about the fact that, well, there had to be some meetings to discuss her even thinking about running and announcing that she's running and getting on the campaign trail to run. And of course, at that time, she was running as an independent, if I'm not mistaken. I don't believe she was running on the Democratic ticket. I think she was just running as an independent. And she just was compelled. She was moved. I mean, I'm sure after having conversations with family and friends and having prayer, she was moved. And I think we as Black Americans will and should always honor her for being the very first Black person to say, I'm going to run for president. Because if you were a Black woman or a Black girl during that time and you were really paying attention, what a role model to step forward and give you inspiration and motivation to, not if you're going to run for office, but to have your own business, to seek higher positions in a company, to do things at another level. Basically saying you can do. And I think that was one of the things that came out of her candidacy, saying, you know, you can do if you so desire. It may be a hard and hurtful and, untimely thing, but you have to follow what's in your mind and your heart. And Shirley Chisholm, we do thank you for what you did in 1972 because you set the standard. And it took 12 years before the next Black American decided to run for president.
right. And I love what she said in one of her quotes. If they don't give you a seat at the table, then bring a folding chair.
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was one of the things. And she did. It says here, I'll read this to you. Um, it talked about that she became the first Black candidate for a major party nomination for president of the United States and the first woman to run for the Democratic
Oh,
nomination.
okay. Okay. She did run as a Democrat. Okay.
She ran as a Democrat. So, I mean, and let's talk about something right quick, since we're talking about literacy as well. Would you say that Shirley Chisholm read a lot of books to get where she was?
I would say she read a lot of books, yes.
Okay. All right. So, therefore, we know that we have to keep expanding our knowledge. Is that correct?
Expanding knowledge so that you might gain wisdom is an ongoing, everyday process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's thank you, Shirley Chisholm, for what you have done and how you have set the stage. So it woke up something in me as well. Just, no matter how many times you get kicked, you have to still stand. You have to still find the strength within yourself in order to stand. God gives it to you. And so it's like, okay, in her case, she said if you can't, get find a seat at the table, you bring a folding chair. So in my case, when I don't have the strength to stand, I need crutches and canes,
Right.
to
Right.
stand tall.
Well, the Japanese proverb puts it this way: fall 6 times, get up 7 times.
Yeah.
So, uh, because you fall down or because you fail, doesn't mean it's only permanent if you let it be permanent. If
Hmm.
you fall down, you stay down because you choose to stay down, not because you choose not to get up. So
Yes.
that was, I believe, what Shirley Chisholm did. And again, when you think also at the time of how many House of Representative members were black during that time, there were definitely no black senators at that time. I think if there was a black senator at that time, that might have been Representative Edward Brooke out of Massachusetts. He may have been the only one who was a senator. So she, like I said, she set the bar very high and made a statement. And I'll tell you another thing that Shirley Chisholm did by, even though she probably had already set this tone, but she set the tone where you're going to give her the utmost respect, because in reading, you learn a lot of different words.
Hmm. Hmm.
And sometimes a word can be said to you that you have no idea what the definition means. And it may sound like a pretty word, but if you go look it up, it's a word that cuts you deeply. And this is probably one of the things that she did in order to get respect, because you can't fight people who know words that can just make your head spin. So Shirley Chisholm, again, thank you. 12 years later, I think one of the most iconic individuals to ever be known for running for president, especially as a black person running for president, did not have any political experience, never served in a political capacity. He was a minister by trade. He started an organization that reached out to change society in a lot of different ways. And one of the things that Jesse Jackson did was create an economic presence of what's going on. He made people aware that uh, power is in economics, and if people don't want to serve you or give you what you want or do for you, then you stop spending your money at those places. So Jesse Jackson, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, ran for office twice, and there used to be bumper stickers and things of that nature that used to say "Run, Jesse, run,"
Hmm.
and he did. But again, the timing of him running for office, and again the timing of this country at the time he was running for office probably just did not suit who he was as an individual, because he definitely brought that economic aspect to the table. And when he started telling you to stop spending your money here and there, and people will do that, it got the attention of corporate America. So 1984, 1988, the Reverend Jesse Jackson out of Chicago, and I'm making a point about saying Chicago, out of Chicago, Illinois, ran for president.
Yes. Now I was present for both of those ballots. I was a new voter
Okay.
at that time, and I couldn't wait to vote. I remember hearing about the rallies, and I wanted to go to a few of them myself, and just watching him on TV and just joining in with. At that time, God rest her soul, she was my Sunday school teacher, and she was one of the people that were out there signing us up to vote, and she was a new activist herself. And I just
Right.
remember just, going door to door with her and talking with people. And, she will always end it with Jesse Jackson's quote, "We have to keep hope alive. We have to
Yeah.
keep it alive." So,
Yeah.
um, Jesse Jackson, he kept hope alive. And here we are today, with the successes that we've seen. You know,
Right.
I'm sorry that didn't work out for him, but with him doing the things that he has done and keep doing, he's still paving the way.
Well, and this is something we can touch on real briefly. Although people run for instance, the office of president, it may not work out for them to win, but what it does is give them name presence, name recognition. And when you have those two things working for you, your name will precede you in different environments. So uh, he did not win, but I tell you, his presence was so large that his coalition, and we must mention this, the Rainbow Coalition. Here's a black man who wanted his coalition to be totally inclusive of everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that the Rainbow Coalition, when we think of rainbow in this day and time, it's normally for the LBGTQ uh, individuals in our country, because that's what they use as kind of their moniker and their logo is the rainbow. But Jesse Jackson wanted everyone of color to be able to have access and to have influence and power. So uh, his name during those two times of running for president helped to move the Rainbow Coalition to a higher level, probably generated um, additional funding so that they could do some other things that they were trying to do. And like Attorney Ben Crump, when Jesse Jackson showed up on the scene, everybody got nervous.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody got nervous because Jesse would call you out. He would point out things. He would say things. And, if he ever said, we're going to, don't buy this or don't spend your money there. And it happened, Ronline, people don't really think about it. But when you say 1%, they lost 1% of their total income. And you say, well, that's not a lot. Well, 1% is a penny on every dollar. So when you're talking about millions of dollars and you say 1%, that makes a big difference.
It does.
It
Yeah.
makes a huge difference. So 1% of $1 billion is $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
So you think about that. But
And if that $1 million keep being missing
oh yeah,
quite often.
quite often. I mean, So I mean, because if you used to having that extra bit million, and all of a sudden it's gone, then you got to make some adjustments.
Yeah.
So he was influential in doing the things that he did, and again, working based out of Chicago, not New York, not L.A., but out of Chicago. It made a difference, and it got a lot of people engaged. So Jesse Jackson, Reverend Jesse Jackson, we thank you for being a champion to want to go out and say you're going to run for president. You want to lead the country. So thank you for those two times of running. Uh, and ironically, they were done. He was running in Olympic years, as most times we are doing these presidential nominations and elections. They're doing the Olympic year, so you tie some things that's going on during the Olympics with what's going on as people are running for office. So those two individuals. So 12 years between Jesse Jackson and Shirley Chisholm. But then the next lady, and I'm gonna let you speak on both her and uh, the next female. There were two females who ran for president, kind of back to back. And again, one female, if I'm not mistaken, came out of the state of Illinois, if not Chicago. I'm gonna let you talk about those two women black women who ran for president.
Okay. So Lenora Branch, Falani, uh, she was one. And in 1988, she ran for the presidential election.
With
Under,
Jesse.
say that again.
With Jesse.
With Jesse. Okay. All right. And she was under the New Alliance Party. I had
Hmm.
never heard of that before.
Right.
And she became the first Black woman and the first African American to achieve ballot access
Hmm.
in all 50 states.
Right.
Now, I thought, I thought that this automatically happens in all 50 states, but I'm finding out based on what I read there that that is not true. So,
Right.
can you elaborate on that?
Well, the political system is just that. It is a system, and you have to qualify.
Okay.
And if states have specific things for candidates to be on the ballot in their states, and if you don't qualify or you don't submit or whatever the process is, then you won't be on that ballot.
All right.
It's pretty as simple as that. I guess it's just that simple. So because and again because she was not of one of the two major parties, and that might have been the biggest thing. You're not one of the major on the major party's ticket. So as an independent or a new alliance, they don't recognize you, and that was probably be the biggest thing because she came from an independent. She wasn't a Republican or Democrat. You know, Republicans, Democrats get on the ballot automatically. You are a third party. You got to apply, or you have to be recognized or given approval. So, but because she was able to get that, that made a difference.
Okay. And what I read here, even though she was not on the major party, as in Democratic or Republican, it says here she received more votes for president in the U.S. general or United States general election than any other woman until Jill Stein came on with which the Green Party of the United States in 2012. But
Mm-hmm.
before then, she
Mm-hmm.
received a lot of votes.
Right, right. So
Okay.
she made her mark. She took a stance and put it out there, and so she ran in '88 and then again in '92. So she is a pioneer of sorts. Then the next lady.
Okay. And well, before I go there, I want to talk about one of her quotes. She said, "What's important to create a world that supports everyone's development and not just the wealthy?" So I took heart to that. And then I looked at another one that says, "The goal of therapy is to help people grow in self awareness and self esteem." So, with the history that women have had trying to climb um, that ladder for presidency, it takes a lot of grit. It takes a
Mhm.
lot of grit. And Shirley Chisholm, just going back to her, she is the first pioneer of what that grit looks like.
Yeah, she is.
So, to go to look at what it takes today with all of the political slinging, if you will. I am so thankful that we have women that are on that battlefield that understands you can't quit, and I want it to be to the point where we just don't know the meaning of quitting. We have to keep pressing towards that mark in order to make a difference if that's what we intend to do.
All right.
All right. So the next person is Elizabeth, is Carol Elizabeth Mosley Braun. Now, she is a former senator and American diplomat, politician. a lawyer who represented Illinois in the United States Senate from 1993 to 1999. And she ran for president for that office. And so I really didn't know much about her, but what can you tell us about her? I see that she has done a lot of things. She was the United States ambassador for New Zealand.
Well, you got to think about who was the president at the time. She not only served as a senator, but as an ambassador. And if I'm not mistaken, that would have been maybe during the time of Bill Clinton, if I'm not mistaken. She ran for office of president in, I guess, the 2003 or the 2004 campaign. Let's see. Yeah,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
2004. It would have been 2004. So
Mm-hmm.
she was a dynamic legislator. Like I said, out of Illinois. I want to say she was out of Chicago, and she did a lot of work during her time in the Senate and in Congress. So she made herself known, and again, by her stepping out to run for office, it got her more name recognition. And she was just a very astute individual who was working for the betterment and the quality of life, not only for the people in Chicago and Illinois, but throughout America. So she has her place, and we're thankful that she did seek to run for the office of president. So, you out of the five individuals that have done this who are Black Americans, three of them have been women. And some 30 years after Shirley Chisholm did it, Carol Mosley Braun did it, and we are thankful for them. And then 5 years after the senator from Illinois ran for president, another senator from Illinois ran for president, and I think we've all become very engaged with knowing who that person was.
Okay, but before we announce that person, go ahead and um, do our break.
Well, thank you. You are listening and watching the Kitchings Table here on Awesome Radio 106.9 FM WBIS LP. Always glad to be with you. I'm your host, Earl Kitchings. Joining me is co-host Ronline Cannady. And every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. here on WBIS LP, you can catch us for the Kitchings Table, where we talk about a myriad of things and subjects. And, it's no holds barred. We don't pigeonhole ourselves into any one particular topic. It's just kind of what we're feeling at the time between today and next Tuesday. What happens? A lot of things happen. And we want to stay current as much as possible, but also give you information about things you may not know about. So we're happy to be with you every Tuesday morning. So, Ronline, tell us about that next senator from Illinois who became president.
Okay. All right. So before we move on to that, did I mention that Ms. Braun also um, began her campaign for mayor of Chicago
And
um,
when was this?
back in 2011 for the 2011 election?
Okay.
Okay. And it says she was the first African American woman elected to the U.S. Senate seat, the first African American
Mm-hmm.
U.S. Senator from the Democratic Party, the first
Mm-hmm.
woman to defeat an incumbent
Mm-hmm.
U.S. Senator in an election, and the first female senator, U.S. Senator from Illinois. And it says in January 2023, she was nominated by President Joe Biden to serve as chair of the United States African Development Foundation. That's an organization I never heard of before.
Well, Carolyn Mosley Braun is still relevant when the current president can go back and draw from the pool and pick her because of her work and because of who she is. That says a lot about her when the current president can go back and call your name out and you're still relevant to the process. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. And so now, are we ready to talk about, well, my next person um, who I really want to give homage to is Horace Julian Bond. If
Uh,
it wasn't,
hold on. You didn't talk about the 44th president. You jumping ahead. You didn't say anything about the 44th president. You
all
brought up
right.
you brought up
All
something else about Carolyn Mosley Braun, and now you want to jump to the vice president, and you just gonna overlook Barack. I'm not gonna let you do that. I'm not gonna let you do that. How you just gonna jump over Barack? I mean, the president, Mr. President, two-time president, former senator of Illinois,
yes.
after
Then went
Carolyn Mosley
to
Braun.
right, and
You
then
know,
went on to the U.S. Senate.
oh,
Yes.
thank you. I mean, we don't get too many senators who are black, and you just not gonna just jump over Barack like that. So you go back up. We'll get to Julian Bond before we end this, but you back that up and go back and talk about the 44th president because um, some 20 years after Jesse Jackson made his effort, who was from Chicago, Barack Obama, who is from Chicago, ran for president and became the 44th president of the United States of America. Not one time, but two
But
times.
sometimes.
Okay.
Peace.
Okay. So you
Peace.
you back that up talking about Julian Bond.
Yes. Well, excuse me and apologies
Thank you.
to
I
the
got
world.
you, Mr. President. I got you.
So, yes, our beloved former president of the United States, Barack Obama. Correction, Barack Hussein Obama.
Okay. And
Yes,
and if we didn't have term limits, he would have probably been the first.
to
Well,
do it all over again.
I think Bill Clinton might have done it 3 terms, but I know if he had run again, he probably would have been another 3-term president. We only had one, and that was Franklin Roosevelt. But I
Right.
think if Barack had been given a chance to run in the 2016 election, I think he would have returned back to office, and we would not have experienced what we experienced for those 4 years. But I digress.
You're absolutely right. What I've what I've admired about um, President, the former President Obama, is that he's when it comes to literacy, my understanding before he closed his eyes to go to sleep, he made sure that he was reading something. He made sure that he was abreast of what was going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And he prided himself on the education that was sacrificed for him to get, to receive from childhood throughout adulthood. And even now, to watch him on screen uh, talking about how we must save our environment and how if we don't, how global warming is going to take over and how it's going to be destructive. And it's so the things that um, the powers that be, if you will, fought him on as far as about cleaning up the environment during his time. That was heartfelt for me once I looked at the documentaries that he's done. And I'm looking for him to put out more content, as in begging us to clean the air, to clean the environment, You want to weigh in on that? I see you rocking there.
I'm not going to weigh in on that simply because the environment is under such bombardment. The global warming, the environment is, Mother Nature is taking a beating, and it's taking a beating from the smartest animal on the planet, but also the most destructive animal on the planet, and that's the human being. So I'm not gonna spend any real time talking about the environment. If the former president, is working on something like that, as is the former vice president Al Gore, then I hope that they can make a difference and help correct, or at least start making a change in what's going on in the environmental aspects of not only the country but the world. Because if man does not cease to just keep destroying Mother Nature as it is, the planet will no longer exist, or it exists in such a different way that you won't recognize it. So, if he's doing some good things, President Obama, thank you, sir. Continue to do some good work.
Yes, I definitely agree. My heart just went out of, even my um, just thought process of how I felt about things years and years ago because I didn't understand. But to see it now
Mm-hmm.
is very hurtful, and I hope. But it seems to me though the young people that I've been speaking to, they are paying attention to what's going on, and I do hope that it will impact them in such of a way to where they will not sit by and not do anything. It was just like you were talking about when we were talking about Ben Crump, when you say, I hope every little black boy and every little black girl will say, when they say, well, who you want to be when you grow up? That those two people will be someone to emulate, to be able to carry their mission forward when they're not able to do it themselves, or to stand along with them in order to carry that baton on.
Well, the one thing black children will never be able to say in this day and time, they won't ever be able to say there's never been a black person to be the president of the United States of America. So that particular uh, bucket list item got scratched off, and we can move on. Uh, and the other bucket list item, a black vice president, that got scratched off too.
Yes, and a
So
woman at that.
okay, so moving segueing over to the vice presidential nominees, I'm gonna talk about uh, the first two, and I'm gonna let you talk about the last two as we get ready to close out. So, vice presidential nominees and candidates since 1872, and did not know this until you sent me the information. But the great Frederick Douglass was the vice president of the United States in 1872. They don't talk about that. They don't mention that. Frederick Douglass was a very, very strong activist. He was a strong abolitionist. He was just a strong individual, and he made himself so popular and so powerful during the time of President Lincoln and during the times of the Civil War. He was a free man that um, he got to be. He became elected vice president of the United States in 1872. Started his own newspaper. You name it, he did it in a time where all the things that we have today for technology and things were not around. So Frederick Douglass became the first black vice president in 1872. Now, the next gentleman, he was a remarkable young man out of the state of Georgia. And when Shirley Chisholm was on the scene in 72, he had already been on the scene in 1968. He had already been on the scene in 1968. At the age of 28, in 1968, Julian Bond was nominated for vice president of the United States. Julian Bond was a House of Representative and senator out of the state of Georgia during his time that he served in office. And you may ask, well, why what was the reason he didn't get on the ballot? Because the Constitution states that in order to be on the ballot to run for office at the highest level, you must be 35 years of age. So when they nominated him, he thanked them and respectfully declined because he was too young to go on the ballot at that time. But Julian Bond was a powerful man during his time, very articulate. He did a lot to help move the progression of the NAACP. And I can say I was a witness to that when I lived in Atlanta, knowing that he and many other Black politicians in the state of Georgia and in the city of Atlanta really were moving some things along during a time where the first Black mayor of Atlanta came along, the Honorable Maynard Jackson. And to me, Maynard Jackson is probably the creme de la creme of mayors, bar none. Maynard Jackson was articulate. He was well versed. He was a very knowledgeable man about economics and things of that nature. And I always tell people the story about him being in office as the mayor. When he spoke, it was like E.F. Hutton was speaking. Everybody was listening. They just paused because he was just that articulate. So between Julian Bond and Maynard Jackson and many other people during that time of the 70s, they made a lot of things happen in Georgia. So Julian Bond was an outstanding person.
Yes, and thank you so much for that because I had no idea about him, and I'm just sorry that he's no longer with us because I wanted to know, like, okay, it sounded like to me he's still young enough to run, and then
No.
let me know that he was no longer with us. My heart just was like it broke in pieces
Yeah.
for and I realized that we've had a couple of gems that you can't get them back because they're not here anymore. That could have done a great service to our country, and I definitely believe that he was one of them.
All
Uh,
right.
I wished when you and I were discussing this, I wish they could have rewritten the law to allow him to run for president because they felt that strongly about it. But um,
Well, I
like
think that constitutional piece is in there for a reason. So you don't want to have someone too young without a whole lot of experience having to make heavyweight decisions. So he, he didn't want to wait. He went on and moved his political career forward and House of Representatives and then the state senator of the state of Georgia. So he did what he's supposed to do.
okay, all right. So we're going to wrap this up. We're going to talk about Kamala Harris. Um, I can't say enough about this lady, and I'm just looking forward to the many things that she will go on to do. Um, I know I have a great niece, and she was ecstatic because that is her desire, as a young child, now a growing teenager, to become the president of the United States of America. And she has her ideas of how things that she wants, that she feels needs to happen to bring equality or about to level the playing field so that everyone, regardless of, if you're a human being, she wants to wipe out hunger. And she has her ways, want to be able to put those things into effect to be able to get that done. So when Kamala Harris came on the scene and actually won vice president of the United States, she said, I know I have a chance. She felt victory in her heart.
Mm.
So I want to turn this back over to you.
Well, we are definitely hoping that Vice President Harris will continue to make her mark known. And it's ironic that um, she is the first female of any color to become a vice president. So more power to her. One other person that I would like to just give recognition to was Juma Baraka, who also was nominated for vice president in 2016. Um, so we want to make sure we mention that. Well, Ronline, it looks like before we can get started real good, the time hits us. So that's going to do it for our show today here on the Kitchings Table. Again, I'm Earl Kitchings along with Ronline Cannady. Always check us out here on Awesome Radio, WBISLP 106.9 FM, Roku, YouTube, Facebook, and GPAC 23 on Tuesday mornings at 10 a.m. Until next week, for Ron Lee Cannady, I'm Earl Kitchings saying so long. And as always, do something good for somebody else today. Take care.